Good morning to all. Distinguished Professor G.L. Paris, Honorable Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, Mr. Lalit Veeratunga, Secretary to the President, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Secretary to the Ministry of Defence and Urban Development, the commanders and the officers of Sri Lanka Tri-Services, Excellencies, Secretaries, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed honored and privileged to be the keynote speaker of this 2014 Defence Seminar organized by the Sri Lanka Army, being attended by a rich audience and will be addressed by renowned resource persons from around the world. I wish to thank the Commander of Sri Lanka Army, Lieutenant General Daratnayaka, and his able Director Training, Brigadier Ralph Noguera, for inviting me to speak to this high-profile gathering, and I owe a special thanks to Army Commander General Daratnayaka for giving a warm welcome and kind introduction of my career. Sri Lanka, a challenges to a rising nation, the subject assigned to me to speak at this prestigious event, compelled me to spend some time to research on our country's post-independent journey towards what it is today. And in this process, several milestones we as a nation have passed are in fact eye-openers to be able to understand perspectives, since history has a tendency to repeat itself in future. It is equally important to review the present phase of development and how it has been managed while passing many barricades along the journey to be able to understand the challenges of the present, since the present will invariably be the history of the future. I also thought that it is important to review challenges from a past and present perspective to be able to visualize future perspectives and to equip ourselves to facilitate the management of contemporary challenges in our transition from middle-income economy. The transition from a middle-income economy involves targeting to achieve $7,500 per capita by 2020. Like we have already raised our per capita income from $1,200 in 2005 to $2,400 in 2009, and from there toward $4,000 in 2015, in an extremely challenging environment. I will also touch upon the visionary comments expressed by none other than Mr. Takehiko Nakao, President of the Asian Development Bank, when he visited Sri Lanka in June 2014 on the likely journey of Sri Lanka towards an advanced economy by 2035. My overall aim in this speech is to register the point that history is in fact an analysis of how the past has been managed, that provide lessons learned, facilitating us to manage the present with proper checks and balances, and thereby prevent the repetition of bad experiences of the past to gain high altitude in future. My speech is in 4 parts and hopefully will be 1 hour. I will outline a roadmap from 2005 to 2035, which is what Sri Lanka is aiming at. distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, let me say that the conduct of a seminar of this nature, being held in this peaceful surrounding, at this venture, which is in the heart of the Colombo city, which was hit by terror a few years ago, attended by this rich audience representing about 40 countries, and specifically on the topic assigned to me, could have been an event far from reality. And on top of it, the very subject itself could not be of relevance to us prior to 18th May 2009, being the day on which the 30-year terrorist conflict came to an end. A historic moment to our nation, probably as important as gaining independence in 1948, considering the long struggle we had against terrorism to secure democracy, peace, and development. Therefore, we should at the outset express our gratitude and place on record our appreciation for the invaluable sacrifices and contributions made by Sri Lankan tri-services and their families. It is also to them that His Excellency the President, Mahinda Rajapaksa, entrusted the task of carrying out a humanitarian operation to liberate us from terrorism a few months after he assumed leadership of this nation. It is they who made enormous sacrifices to complete this task during 2006-2009 while supporting a novel concept, a zero casualty theme in the operation. We all know that this bold decision was taken after having exhausted all options available at local levels, while experiencing continuous drawback from an international standpoint, and in the backdrop of escalating mass-scale terrorist attacks throughout. Two major events influenced this move. They reflect two humanitarian considerations behind this decision. One was the Kabitigolla bomb attack on a packed bus carrying innocent villagers to the nearby town on Thursday morning of the 15th June 2006. It killed over 64 innocent people, including 12 children, and leaving 75 others injured. The other compelling reason was the capture of the Mavil Aru irrigation water supply scheme by LTT terrorists and closure of sluice gates, denying access to water to the innocent villagers and people in that area on the 26th June 2006. This is how the so-called internationally monitored peace accord was respected by LTTE, a gross abuse and violation of human rights. I still remember the absolute frustration we went through, having to live and work in such surroundings, and how all of us as a nation felt that enough is enough, expecting the government to liberate the nation from brutal terrorism, which caused us enormous sufferings from nearly 3 decades, the best part of life of my generation. The astute and visionary leadership of His Excellency the President of Sri Lanka for spearheading this once considered impossible task, the amazingly talented and committed Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa for managing this high-risk task as the Chief Accounting Officer of the Ministry of Defence deserve special recognition with a round of applause from all of us. I am sure that the global community who truly stand against terrorism and are committed to eradicate terrorism in the interest of humanity, peace and development feel the same. I wish to quote the words of Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, and I'm honored that he is in the audience. The renowned former Minister of India, an economist, and the present chairman of BJP Committee on Strategic Action. During his recent visit to Sri Lanka, I quote, "I have known no other country which has decisively finished terrorism of this kind, and this is no ordinary terrorism. If you look around the world, people have had no clear success in eliminating terrorism as you have." He went on to say, I quote, "Today, even Tamils up in the north admit that at least they know that when their children go to school, they would return back in night. When their husband go to work, they would return back in the night. That is the stability and certainty the end of war has brought about to our country, for which the credit should no doubt go primarily to the bold leadership of His Excellency the President, the committed Defense Secretary, and the tri-services. I must also mention that the role of post-conflict tri-services is equally humanitarian and development-oriented, as they shared their professional skills in demining activities and resettlement of displaced people, looking after their own colleagues and families who became victims in this conflict, and architectural and engineering skills in restoring historical buildings. Few of them you saw in the brief film that shown here, and flood protection and urban sanitation, besides they themselves entering into performing arts and sports as well. It was sheer determination and not heavy military, human or financial resources that made it possible. Certainly not the colossal sums of money, machines and people that many countries currently spend on similar activities. As Finance Secretary, I know that they fully appreciated the financial difficulties that we had confronted. I like therefore to begin my speech by quoting former South African President, late Nelson Mandela, who once said, "The greatest glory in living lies in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." Let me begin my speech by showing how Sri Lanka became a marginalized nation since independence. Sri Lanka gained independence, ladies and gentlemen, in 1948 from the British, who ruled the country in the process of colonial rule that commenced in 1505 with Portuguese taking over the country, then by Dutch rule in 1658, followed by the British in 1815. The economy in early 50s enjoyed external assets equivalent to 12 months of country's import requirement. The country was economically second only to Japan in the entire Asia. Nevertheless, post-independent development in Sri Lanka were grim. Political instability, short-term populist policies, experimenting extreme development models by different political parties that form governments, lack of long-term national and inability to position the country in the proper global perspectives made Sri Lanka a lagging nation, 3% by mid-1970s, with an unemployment as high as 25% of the labor force, and youth insurrection in 1971. The absence of a policy strategy to ensure food security, the lack of adjustment to global oil price hike witnessed from early 1970s to build an energy-efficient economy, and continued expansion of the regulatory regime that weakened private sector initiatives made economic management essentially inefficient. Although the economy was reopened in 1977 with liberalization and deregulation, creating high expectation to recapture what the nation lost for 30 years since independence. By 1980, economy lost macroeconomic stability with high fiscal deficit, monetary expansion, loss of international reserves, high depreciation in exchange rates, and inflation. The general strike in 1980, civil riots in 1983, that saw the beginning of the nearly 30-year LTT terrorism. Then the southern insurgents in 1987-88, the change of government in 1988, 1984, then again in 2001, while being engaged in managing a conflict-trapped economy which badly demanded a development agenda that would facilitate its people to move away from poverty and low-income trap, were critical milestones that led to the country to be further marginalized in the world economy, which was truly growing. The key lessons from this long period since 1977 is that compromising national security and macroeconomic security were prime factors that prevented the economy from emerging on its own comparative advantage and strength. The Asian tsunami struck Sri Lanka in December 2004, taking nearly 40,000 lives, wiping out around 100,000 houses, displacing many, and destroying schools, hospitals, infrastructure, and private property. This incident alerted the country on the adverse impact of climate change and that environment security cannot be overlooked in the process of development. Although the country has witnessed certain improvements in human resource development and in selected private sector activities, while recording around 4.5% average growth in GDP, outlook was so grim, with poverty and unemployment remaining high, external reserve falling substantially to a level not sufficient to import even 3 months of country requirements of imports, and the budget running a high deficit of around 10% of GDP for decades, on top of an accumulated debt exceeding GDP. These factors provide us a picture of the balance sheet that the country was managing when His Excellency the President was elected as the leader of this nation in 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, if Sri Lanka is to emerge on its own comparative advantage and strength with an integrated global economy framework, the challenge is to restore security of 5 pillars which I referred to earlier from history, namely food security, national security, macroeconomic security, environment security, and human resource security. Managing this task is the underlying success story of development since 2005. As Albert Einstein said, out of clutter, find simplicity. From discord, find harmony. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. This supports the underlying philosophy of Mahinda Chintana, the vision for a new Sri Lanka. The post-2005 National Development Strategy, Mahinda Chintana, Vision for the Future, prioritize post-tsunami rehabilitation and reconstruction, national infrastructure projects that remain stalled for years, revitalization of agriculture, and adopting bold policy decisions connected with the national budget and macroeconomic management. The post-tsunami reconstruction and post-conflict rehabilitation, resettlement and reconstruction have provided a unique transformation to those in affected areas while transforming mined lands into green fields. The government also recognized that along with restoring national security and peace, infrastructure development should go hand in hand, be put in place through public investment as a critical component of the road and expressway network, globally competitive port and airport network, an irrigation and water distribution network, and a strong telecommunication network together with well-distributed urban and township development. This would in turn create opportunities while enabling the produce of rural farmers to have access to local and global markets, places, and for investment in the real economy to go beyond Colombo and few other cities. The progress made in infrastructure creation, which the nation was desperately demanding for decades since independence, is amazing. The country has a new expressway connecting the western province and the southern province. The steps are underway to build a northern expressway and Ruanpura expressway to connect Colombo and network with national highway to north and east. Railway connectivity is to be established between major townships across the country. These expressways and the railway network are to be connected through national highway and provincial and rural roads through government's inclusive road development strategy to be promoted several themes such as tourism, exports, logistics, IT BPO services, high learning educational establishment, and township for rapid development. Progress in power generation and distribution is another success story. As of now, the country is benefiting from a power generating capacity of 4,100 megawatts consisting of diversified power sources as against 2,000 megawatts of power largely depend on oil in 2005. Renewable energy including hydro and solar are being added to an improved transmission and distribution system. Almost 100% of households in this country today enjoy access to electricity. Investments have been lined up to double the refinery, aviation and bunkering storage capacity, as well as to modernize pipeline distribution system over 2015-17 to further improve energy-based economy and more particularly energy security. Public investment in irrigation and water supply remain a priority to enable several areas of non-irrigated land to be cultivated, improve water treatment facilities, and provide pipe-borne access to drinking water all households by 2017. Investments have been also directed to contain non-revenue water in Colombo to below 18% by 2017 from 50% this year. Urban infrastructure development includes the construction of over urban housing units to house shanty dwellers in a well-developed township environment in the city of Colombo and to relocate defense headquarters to release prime urban land for alternate commercial and property development. Greater Colombo Flood Protection Scheme to convert suburban townships as environmental friendly living areas and transform historical buildings as up and shopping complexes capable of attracting tourists and move on to an integrated urban development strategy to make growth-oriented public investment initiatives, private investment including FDIs, are encouraged for urban property development, construction of tourist hotels with international network arrangements, and reclaim 450 acres of land to build a new port city and attract foreign direct investment from global investors looking for competitive locations. This transformation was not without challenges. Ending the costly war against terrorism, itself was a major challenge. Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, again, the respected person from whom I quoted in India, in his recent speech in Colombo said, and I quote, "As an Indian, I can say that most Indians share this view. We are proud of your president for decisively finishing a sinister terrorist organization which was a threat to our country too, and therefore let no activity in the international arena subtract from that." Sometimes I wonder whether this whole human rights issue have been contrived to bottle down or to belittle or reduce this massive achievement. Respecting human rights and welfare, several thousands of displaced consequent to the 2004 tsunami, and also those who fell hostage in the 2009 LTT final phase were provided food, shelter, and sanitation adhering to best global standards. Amazingly, no epidemic was recorded, and maternal and child mortality, even in such circumstances, was maintained at zero level, reflecting how well the humanitarian side of development was managed with determination. Ex-combatants were put on rehabilitation programs and social integration initiatives. Some have recruited to Sri Lanka police and government services, and now they are on government payroll. The demining of almost entire mine land, rebuilding conflict-torn areas with livelihood development, restoration of provincial councils and local authorities in such areas through democratic elections, removal of emergency laws that prevail for years as though they are normal laws, removal of road barriers and security checkpoints, handling war risk insurance payments, restoration of housing and sanitation, public service delivery mechanism, schools, hospitals, police stations, courthouses, marketplaces, etc., were features managed in a salutary manner in the process of taking the country forward using domestic resources, borrowed funds, and mobilization of foreign aid by the government of Sri Lanka. Trilingual policy has been promoted. A task force headed by Secretary to the President, fully funded by the national budget, has been engaged to ensure that the recommendations of the lessons learned and reconciliation commissions are implemented by relevant agencies in a timely manner. On the economic front, the US and UK financial fallout in 2008-9, the sharp rise in oil prices, the US fiscal crisis and Eurozone economic crisis in 2011-12, and the global economic slowdown placed the already weaned Sri Lanka on another wave of economic challenges. While many countries deferred responses, including India, Sri Lanka was able to take bold corrective economic measures such as allowing greater flexibility in exchange rate, adjustments to fuel, electricity and water tariff, monetary policy tightening to manage excessive credit expansion, and several reform initiatives such as reorienting taxation strategy towards broadening its base, improved debt management strategies. The government secured $2.5 billion, a 3-year standby credit arrangement from the International Monetary Fund to place the country on emerging global order, and this was the only successful IMF program carried out uninterruptedly in this country, as well as previous program carried out by past regime suspended halfway through due to unsuccessful implementation. We are humbly proud today, as we have already paid back half of IMF borrowing, reflecting country's economic strength. This success was because of the fact that the government adopted peace in workplace approach instead of blood in the street approach in carrying out these challenging reforms. On top of all these, getting the much needed infrastructure facilities in place, addressing macroeconomic outlook and many structural challenges through pragmatic reform initiatives were not easy by any yardstick. The Sri Lankan economy grew at an average growth rate of 7% since 2005 to date, a break from the past pattern of unstable growth that averaged around 4.5%. Over the same period, trade grew by almost fourfold in US dollar terms. The economy has brought about a globally integrated manufacturing sector that has a lead in up-end apparel and now breaking grounds into newer areas such as IT, diversified tourism, high-value tea, medium and high-technology industrial activities such as shipbuilding, electrical transformer manufacturing, etc., and a buoyant service sector that now account for about GDP. This year, the projected growth is 7.8%, probably one of the highest in Asia, and the performance of manufacture of exports, tourism-led services, construction industry, and domestic consumer demand during the first 6 months of the year is conducive for this growth. The service sector is moving beyond, reflecting a value chain growth in primary, secondary, and services activities and the structural shift in the economy. Inflation is mid-single digit, and nominal growth is now driven by high real growth, a sharp departure from the past when high nominal growth was nothing but attributable to inflation. Year-on-year inflation averaged at 4.9% in the first half of this year. There is a steady build-up of reserves, now stand at $9 billion as against $2 billion in 2005, and the volatility of the rupee is contained. The buoyant growth of exports earning from goods and services, inflows from tourism, and overseas remittances keep the current account deficit well financed. There is stability in the balance of payment transaction due to buoyant inflows against moderate outflows, providing an environment conducive for exchange rate management. The fiscal deficit of around 3.7% of GDP is in the first half of the year is conducive to reduce the deficit below 5%, the lowest in post-77 period. Reduced stable movements of the exchange rates, a lower fiscal deficit complemented by better performance of large state-owned business enterprises, parallel with high growth, are supportive to further reduce public debt to GDP close to 70% by 2015 in comparison to over 100% by 2005. Underpinning the notable progress made through several bold policy and development initiatives, Sri Lanka has performed well in the region in terms of many global indices. The country is well placed in the World Rule of Law Index and the Global Peace Index, being on the top in South Asia. It also places high in the region as per the Global Infrastructure Index, Economic Freedom Index, Ease of Doing Business Index, Global Competitiveness Index. The Human Development Index ranks Sri Lanka among the top, not just in South Asia, in the entire Asian region, while commanding the second highest number of chartered accountant students in the world, only next to UK. With the high rate of enrollment for medicine, engineering, commerce, law, nursing, teaching and technical field, country is well positioned to attract professional services and related industries and move from unskilled labor-intensive industries to skilled and technology-based industries. Sri Lanka is among the top 50 leading service locations in the world. in the delivery of IT BPO services and other knowledge services, having advanced to the 21st place. The evolving regulatory arrangements are conducive to promote clinical trials and research, which is primary to develop healthcare services to an advanced stage, having mobilized countries' medical specialists, scientists and technicians, while also developing several facets of pharmaceutical industry. In terms of per capita income too, Sri Lanka is on the top of South Asia, securing a position among the top 10 position in Asia in entire. Of all these indicators remain our ambition. As once said by Donald Trump, the American business magnate, investor and author, we need to get going, move forward and aim high. Plan a takeoff. Don't just sit on the runway and hope someone will come alone and push the airplane. It simply won't happen. Change your attitude and gain some altitude. Let me explain the journey towards high income economy 2020. The government has set ambitious development goals, as Donald Trump has preached, for 2020, being the year that reaches the third 5 years of Mahinda Chintana, National Vision for Development Strategy, which is in keeping with the first 5 years, 2005 to 2009, and the second covering from 2010 to 2015, surpassing US $7,500 per capita income in 2020 remain the income goals. Maintaining a 97% employment level with an increased number in the skill categories of the workforce remain our employment objective. The zero maternal and child mortality and longer life expectancy of near 8 years, along with 100% secondary school enrollment and higher computer literacy as high as 70%, form our Human Development Foundation targets. All districts to be made poverty-free in terms of poverty head count, while also freeing them from communicable and non-communicable diseases and malnutrition are poverty reduction goals. A lower single-digit inflation, being the price stability goal, will gear improved financial management and supply side in the real economy. In this context, the underlying economic growth rate needs to be accelerated beyond 8%. This scale of economic growth depends on the level of investment, its productivity, improvements in the policy environment and institutional setup to do business efficiently, application of research, technology and innovation, macroeconomic stability, national security and law and order. It is a much more challenging task than the previous 2 5-year phases, similar to an airplane that take off on a long-haul flight, where the year 2020 will only be a stopover destination. This long journey needs to be supported through a strong national budget, which will bring macroeconomic security. It will be possible when the budget continues to channel an increased volume of resources in support of core public investment in physical infrastructure, with parallel private investment shifting towards 30% of GDP from the current level of 24% of GDP. Equally, the budget needs to diverge a large volume of funds for the development of human resources and research and technology in excess of 6% of GDP towards creating a productive and demand-driven human resource base. Complementing the trust of social responsibility of the government, public spending on social security needs to be protected with special emphasis on the elderly and vulnerable groups. Channeling enhanced public expenditure to rural-centric development initiative, and agriculture, fisheries and livestock is the core of the all-inclusive development strategy, Mahinda Chintana Vision for a New Sri Lanka, to further strengthen food security. All these are visible only if the nation is capable of providing resources for national security, which is a primary responsibility of the government. Our challenge in the years ahead, while moving ahead in this journey towards success, is in line with these considerations. I would argue that these multifaceted considerations, along with public investment in infrastructure done by the government and state enterprises at a stable level of 7% of GDP, have helped to sustain increased private investment, including FDIs, from 17.6% of GDP in 2009 to 24% of GDP in 2014, in 5 years, 5%, with considerable efficiency improvement as well. The challenge in this regard is to raise private investment to 30% of GDP by 2020, focusing areas in which Sri Lanka has an edge while raising public investment to 8% and being total investment to near 40%, along with continued efficiency improvement through improving the ease of doing business and technology, research, skills and manpower resource development. Benchmarking success stories in development is important as much as making investment for growth to keep pushing the growth momentum. Sri Lankan tea commodity for many, many years with a less than $600 million export income has gained momentum in recent years and is gaining grounds through many homegrown brands and an expanded domestic value chain, having entered high-end markets covering advanced and emerging economies, international hotel chains and airlines capable of surpassing $2.5 billion export earnings. This journey to achieve high export earnings backed by a strong plantation economy and to retain its global recognition is being supported by recent budget initiatives by His Excellency the President. Apparel is another great success story that has concentrated on international brand clothing, manufacturing, while maintaining high quality, being sensitive to timely delivery, adopting best business practices, ethics and respect to decent labor practices in good working environment, and above all, having looked at emerging markets such as India, China, Brazil, Japan and Russia, and reach among the top apparel manufacturers in the world. Like our success stories of the apparel and tea industries, the government also pushed certain other areas like further lead in terms of country's growth strategy. The government supported IT BPO business, which was around $200 million. We did not know how to count in 2007. And moving towards surpassing over $1 billion export earnings and creating around 100,000 well-paid employment opportunities by 2015 in a newly created policy and infrastructure environment supported by emerging skills in the labor force. This industry now project, not the government, this industry project now $5 billion net export earning by 2022. Along with the skills development drive, the remittance income from overseas employment by Sri Lankan people is expected to cross the benchmark figure of $10 billion by 2016. In 2013, the government created a legal framework to develop free ports and bonding facility to build a logistics service economy. New investments realized in logistics services, prospects of relocation of global business headquarters, and the generation of new activities having combined many inputs mobilized to free port areas have paved way for Sri Lanka to capitalize on its strategic location supported by newly built infrastructure at Magam Runapura in the south and Greater Colombo City here. The logistic industry and provision of services have just begun to attract Sri Lanka as a destination in which headquarters of economic operations could be set up. New aspiration of a marine economy is emerging with new prospects created having rationalized charges imposed on importers and exporters, the creation of the shipping corporation, the proposed setting up of a marine industry regulatory authority coupled with a low tax regime for professionals. Manufacture of electrical products, machinery and spare parts has also gained momentum. Energy sector related activities that are expanding similarly include the manufacture of high quality electrical equipment, electrical wires and cables. Shipbuilding and boat manufacturing have set the tone for high-tech industrial development in Sri Lanka. Local enterprises have made a dent in the manufacture of multi-day fishery boats, agricultural machinery. The jewellery industry has also responded to a notable expansion in exports as well as in domestic trade. Manufacture of construction material, ceramics, tiles and sanitary ware, office and household furniture, home decor, etc. provide new scales of investment opportunities to meet middle-income aspirations. In promoting trade towards a greater volume of exports and import substitution, the trade and tariff strategy has been suitably directed in recent years. Free trade agreement with India and Pakistan, as well as the proposed free trade agreement with China to be launched shortly, are being approached to secure greater volume of trade with these large emerging markets. Our government shares the view of the newly elected Prime Minister of India, Honorable Narendra Modi, who said in the Independence Day last week, "Sell anywhere but manufacture locally." Tourism is becoming a lead industry, both in terms of foreign and local tourism, and it is expected to record a turnover of $2 billion by way of foreign earnings in 2014, which is expected to be $5 billion industry by 2020. This has opened an array of opportunities benefiting those engaged in extending homestays and boutique-type hotel facilities, indigenous medical practices combined with countries' matured Western health system, hair and beauty care services, high-quality herbal hair and body care products development, gift and souvenir manufacturing, furniture manufacturing, transportations, local agriculture, and has pushed the expansion of the construction industry itself. These are some of the visible changes in the emerging economic structure of Sri Lanka, and these new activities should create the next wave of growth. Almost all of them are in the hands of the corporate private sector and SMEs. Tea, rubber, spices, herbs, fruits, vegetable, poultry and apparel products, and even high-quality bottled water have entered the longer value chain process from simple labor usage of skills, technology and quality becoming brand-driven business to be able to secure high prices and attract up-and emerging markets. Supporting this emerging scenario, while consolidating the new tax policy and fiscal policy strategy, a revenue administration and management system, and an integrated treasury management system are being lined up to be fully operational by 2015. Concerted efforts are being made to simplify overlapping regulations, taxes and levies that have crept into system due to the build-up of layers of operational institutions, to reduce transaction costs and make doing business easier, particularly to SMEs. The automation of the Sri Lanka Customs import-export documentation process is being operationalized. Work is in progress for the provision of 24-hour, 7-day centralized cargo processing facilities for cargo exports to further facilitate exports. In the process of advancing towards upper middle income per capita, The government has recognized the importance of legal and financial sector reforms as announced in the 2014 budget. In the legal sphere, reducing law delays, setting up dedicated courts to handle commercial disputes, and expedite early dispensation of such cases could be highlighted as dire needs. It is encouraging to note that the introduction of technology to courthouses, promoting court-assisted mediation, and revision of superior court rules are in progress to reduce delays, among other reform initiatives that are being implemented. The financial sector needs to be repositioned to meet the needs of an emerging economy, crossing its traditional boundaries through new and diverse economic activities while also gaining ground in the region. The operation of a large number of small financial institutions with a low capital base is a constraint to satisfy regulatory standards, particularly in the backdrop of financial instruments getting diversified. It is in this background that the 2014 budget, His Excellency the President proposed a medium-term consolidation process to strengthen the financial institution that is now in progress. IT is another area of priority in policy and institutional development. Here again, an inclusive policy strategy is being implemented in recent times, being IT into both education and workplace. These are steps taken to strengthen best practices in our governance structure. Ladies and gentlemen, let me stress that in the process towards graduating as a high middle income economy, the remaining facets of poverty will have to be addressed, while taking safeguards to protect vulnerable groups, uplift livelihood avenues, and provide gainful employment opportunities to low-income households, and while conserving Sri Lanka's biodiversity and environment. Achieving a high-income economy will make sense only if it moves parallel to address problems encountered in distant areas, still vulnerable to adverse weather conditions such as droughts. Incentive structure and institutional setting should be geared towards promoting advanced water management technologies and drought-resistant cultivation practices among farmers to address climate-related risks, including having in place standby funding support to mitigate extreme risks. Considering the importance of the rural agrarian economy, the SMEs, food security, and environment priorities, the continuity of the present rural-centric approach towards development is likely to provide greater prospects to become a higher per capita nation that is free from poverty and has an acceptable level of equity with regard to households and regional income distribution. In this process, given the high standards that are already achieved, it is equally important to target a zero maternal and child mortality and address emerging challenges of non-communicable disease among the population to improve quality of life and productivity of the workforce and maintaining the healthy population whose life expectancy on average would be 80 or 85 years during the next 10 years. Hence, surpassing high per capita income growth process has been made inclusive. This brings together the synergy of underlying 5 hubs, namely shipping, aviation, energy, trade and commerce, tourism, forming the foundation to drive the economy as a strategic global destination. You would see that it is structurally different from the legacy up to 2005 that I described. It needs to be double and well-integrated effort by the tri-service, the civil service, and the private sector working on this common national vision. Ladies and gentlemen, let me come to the conclusion. In Sri Lanka, post-2005 development journey and the post-conflict takeoff are vision-driven. By the the President Mahinda Rajapaksa, who helped the country to reach calm waters, having sailed in rough seas while placing the economy on an inclusive development strategy. The country now has strong prospects of reaching $7,500 per capita by 2020 and entering a transitional phase to become an advanced five. Succeeding in this challenging transformation demands further strengthening of the ongoing rural-centric development strategies to facilitate livelihood development and food security, a social security system for the vulnerable, a preserved natural environment with biodiversity, infrastructure development, uncompromising national peace, law and order, and maintaining continuity from a policy perspectives to boost business confidence to advance the country steadily. Hence, we need to place trust in the nation-building strategy of Mahinda Chintana national vision to make 2035 development goal a reality. Sri Lanka as an emerging nation, which is increasingly integrating with the global economy, need to be attentive to development taking place around the world as well. Advanced G7 nations, as shown in the recent economic magazine, are performing below potential growth in their countries owing to productivity lacks, aging population, as well as aging infrastructure. All these nations are heavily indebted and run high fiscal deficit, requiring difficult reforms with strong political commitment in their own country. The recent financial crisis, along with the slowdown witnessed by these economies, have raised many structural problems connected with labor market and immigration policies. Newly emerged BRICS nations too have slowed down and are faced with constraints to sustain high growth rates similar to those of past 20 to 30 years due to compressed demand from advanced economies, as well as strong exchange rates, high labor and material costs, environmental issues, and social safeguard concerns. Initiatives are underway to form new multilateral bank of BRICS nations, a bank of SAARC nations, and a bank for Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank led by China to address capital needs of emerging and developing countries, as well as to address concerns of developing countries for years by existing multilateral financial institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. The use of trade sanctions has undermined the thrust of global trade and investment arrangement under WTO. Similarly, the stand taken by newly elected government of India recently to oppose WTO-led trade reform in respect of agriculture in the interest of food security reflect voice of Asia on this matter. The lead in Asia-Pacific region in the global economy signals for a new economic order. The operations of NGOs in a non-regulatory environment has become a threat to financial management, inclusive development, and law and order itself. Widespread terrorism has threatened shipping, aviation, and financial transactions that risk trade, tourism, and investment. Computer crimes, drug trafficking, smuggling are certain other facets of risk associated with the global economy. Adjusting to manage these risks and de-risking the economy suitably that we need to be mindful of without being complacent with the many good achievements made so far. Challenges are not new. Every failure in history is a lesson to learn as to why challenges should not be overlooked or mismanaged. Our history has amazingly rich days of glory and national pride, not second to any other country, and the human tendency is to boast about such glory days. But we know that we have also had bad times with full of misery. We could be mindful of possible risk, judging by historical experience. I feel that although history is the past, the present and the future invariably become history. For us, the year 2005 is now history. Our balance sheet in 2014 is distinctly different from 2005 and definitely richer than then. Yet, in 2020, the year 2014 would be a history. Therefore, we should be determined to manage the present and future well if we are to become a nation that can speak of a proud history. We should therefore try to prevent the recurrence of historical mistakes. This compels us to ensure that nation building is made on a solid foundation, on a 5 steady pillars that I noted earlier, namely national security, food security, energy security, environmental security, and macroeconomic security, while also not compromising human resource development, peace, and prosperity. Managing all these requires us to be vigilant at all times in all aspects of our respective responsibilities in public life. The countries need to be vigilant to national security risk as well as economic and environmental risk. It is sad if we have to say at any time that we underestimate the risk, as now we see in respect of Ebola virus. I believe that success comes as our President in every aspect of his management has shown that start by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.